Hello and welcome to Insurance Agents Talk Shop. I'm your host, Doug Coombs, Chief Marketing Officer at SIAA. Today's episode is Owning and Managing a Successful Independent Agency. I'd like to introduce my guest, Miles Merwin, owner and president of Advisors Insurance Agency in Greenville, South Carolina. If you'd like to learn more about Miles or Advisors Insurance Agency, please visit advisorsinsuranceagency.com. Because it's appropriate, I'm informing our listeners that Advisors Insurance Agency is a member agency of SIAA and specifically Assure Alliance in South Carolina. Miles, I understand that you were a captive agent until about 8 years ago. Can you share a bit about your experience and reasoning in moving to an independent insurance agency?
Sure, Doug, and I appreciate you taking time to speak with me and giving me a platform to speak on. I actually worked for a State Farm agent in my local area for, the first one for 6 months. And then he came to inform me on a Saturday morning that I wasn't meant for the business and that I should look for another job. And I remember sitting in the parking lot in my Jeep. I think I been married maybe 8 months, not very long. I hadn't been married very long. And I had to go back home. Oh, I remember. And I asked him, I said, hey, will you at least give me a recommendation? He said he would think about it. I was like, dear God, how bad could that have been? And so I thought to myself, I was sitting in my car in the parking lot in that morning before I had to go home and tell my new spouse that I'd been let go. And I thought to myself, I switched from an employee mindset to an employer mindset right there in that parking lot. And knew that I did not know enough to do it on my own yet, but I knew that I had to bite my tongue and learn as much as I could so that I could do it on my own. And I think 2 weeks later, I got another job right down the street at another State Farm office and worked for an agent for about 3.5 years until he was about to retire. And so it was time for me to go off and figure out what I was going to do for myself.
That meant what?
That meant I looked at a lot of different options, captive options, and then I met with my financial advisor at the time, who really had nothing to advise me of when it comes to money. I had none. And he said, hey, what do you think about opening an independent insurance agency? And just realizing I wanted to own a business, not manage a business. The independent route made sense. I could build actual net worth. So the company, the business you create actually has value to it. You could sell it if you want to. And so after doing a bunch of research and my financial advisor actually coming on board as a silent partner who basically opened up his checkbook and said, if you need money, send me an email, I'll transfer it to you. And I believe in you. Let's do this. And so he became a silent partner, and I tried to figure out how to get appointments with carriers and called Travelers and called, all the carriers. And they said, how many clients do you have? None. How much revenue do you have? Zero. How much experience do you have in independent insurance agencies? None. Have you ever ran a business? No. Great. You can't write for us. Okay. So do some searching online and came across the SIAA and came across my local chapter, which is Assure Alliance. Had a conversation with them, talked to a few of my mentors, and they basically said, look, the way we see it, write a check, you're in business. Don't write a check, you're looking to get into business. So, that was the end of that decision. Write the check and start and be in business.
Very good. So there's a couple of things you've kind of outlined there. First of all, there's a little bit about your personal makeup, meaning you discovered through a couple of life events that you're the kind of guy who wants to own a company, not be an employee, right?
Yes.
And so we'll get into a little bit of that as we go along about what that means, what that entails. But also, life goes, it's curvy. It's not a straight line, so to speak. And so there were a couple of things that had to come into place. You talked about your silent partner. You talked about a network. And so these are components that enabled you to actually open the door, so to speak.
Yes.
And that's important. I think it's important for others to hear that, others who are either in the position of no longer having a job for whatever reason, and even being told that this is not necessarily your line of business, and here you are 8 years later with quite a successful agency, as we'll also get into a little bit further. So, that being said, do you mind sharing a few vitals about your agency with our audience? Meaning, would you tell us a little bit about your size in terms of premium or revenue, staffing levels, number of policies, and anything else you'd be willing to share to give folks a sense of the size of your operation, the one that you've built over 8 years?
Sure, yeah. So our anniversary will be March 15th of 2021, will be 9 years total.
Wow.
And on March 15th, 2012, it was me and a laptop and a cell phone and a little bit of room in a spare bedroom upstairs in my house. My wife was newly a mother and was at home with our 6-month-old, and we had no benefits, no income. We had nothing. And so that's where it started. I walked up and down streets. I'd make phone calls all day long. And then at 5 o'clock, when people were coming home, I'd walk down the street and go into neighborhoods of homes that looked like nice homes. And I'd knock on their doors. And if they even opened the blinds, I would take down a note that they opened the blinds, and I'd go home and we'd write thank you notes to those people for, even looking at me through the window, and mail those. And, so I learned, I like to say I learned the hard way, but quickly learned what to do, what not to do. And I knew I didn't want to knock on doors very long.
Right.
And so, you just open to opportunities. You're seeking, you're hungry. It's that guerrilla marketing perspective. And so I realized quickly that, hey, this is really hard. I've got to figure out how to do this a little bit smarter. So you pick up the phone, you start calling people, asking how they got places, and you quickly adapt. So I quickly adapted. I realized what I didn't want to do, and then quickly figured out what I did want to do. And so I wanted to hire. So I started hiring and hired really good people. That was something I really want to do. I want to make sure, if we're a basketball team, I watched Duke play last night, and Coach K's, he's at home because he doesn't have COVID, but was in the vicinity of someone who did. So Shire was coaching, and they were down by 16 last night, and they came back and won by just a couple of points. But in order to win that game, they needed starters on their team, and they need a bench with starters. You can't have C-level players. C-level players take A-level players and turn them all into Bs. And so I didn't want B-level players. I wanted A-level players throughout the company. And so I made sure to hire those people and surround them by more A players. And so we have grown from 0 to right now we have on average around 18 people. And then we have anywhere between 4,000 and 5,000 customers, $2 million in revenue, and we have one location. We have employees or team members all across the world. So we have a number of them here in the upstate of South Carolina. We have team members now in St. Martin, in California, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and during COVID times, we're all working remotely, almost 100%.
Wow. But quite an organization from where it was almost 9 years ago.
Oh yeah, way different. My job is not the same as it was 9 years ago. I was selling and producing and doing everything 9 years ago, and I tried to hang up my hat on selling a couple years ago.
Well, that kind of leads me into my next question, which the fact is that it was recommended that I have you on this show by the CEO of Assure Alliance, Holly Heron, and because of your ability and success in owning and running, which includes leading and managing your insurance agency. And one of her comments to me was, Miles knows when to stop thinking like a producer and act like a principal. What do you think she meant by that?
Early on, I remember reading the book E-Myth by Robert E. Gerber, and lots of people have read this book. But it really resounded to me when it talked about how McDonald's product was not, or Ray Kroc's product was not hamburgers and French fries. That wasn't his product. His product was the McDonald's franchise and the success that that could bring to individual owners. And so that immediately changed how I looked at my business. And then it was just an easy practice. It had me write down an entire organizational chart and write down all the potential positions in the agency from the top all the way to the bottom. And at the very beginning, Doug, I penciled in my initials in every position that I had to do. And it was all of them, right?
Right.
It was all of them. My initial was on all of them. And then I could highlight the ones in green that I wanted to do or I thought I could do. And I highlighted the ones in red that I wanted to replace as soon as possible. And slowly but surely, I figured out what I was good at, what I wasn't good at, what was energy producing, what was energy draining. And as I, had the revenue and had the opportunity to find the right person to fill those spots, I slowly but surely erased my initials and put somebody else's in there. And that helped me really build the business. And I give one other example, and I think one moment where things really changed as well, other than that book, was I had a producer that I hired, and he miserably failed. And I had to tell myself, why did this person fail? They had the right opportunity, they had all the right products to sell, and so what happened? There's only two things that could have gone wrong. It was the person didn't have the right network or personality to sell, or they had bad leadership and direction. Those are the two things. And I ended up having to let that person go. I hired the very next person I hired, which was in a month or so, came in, same chair, same desk, same room, same carriers, same business. I was a little bit smarter, led a little bit better. He was a little bit better of a networker and more efficient and worked better. And he outproduced everyone in my office, including myself. And so that right then I thought, I'm not the best producer. I'm not the best salesperson when it comes to selling insurance policies. It looks like possibly there's someone else out there that's actually better than me at that. What does it look like for me to stop competing with my sales team and start recruiting, training, and leading a sales team? That to me created growth.
And that makes a lot of sense. I guess what I'm wondering as you say this, and I'm getting the sense of this learning journey you've been on during these past 9 years. Have there been other resources for you in terms of improving your ability to lead as opposed to just managing, that sort of thing?
Yeah, great question. And I keep going back to life experiences. And Billy Williams, I listen to him speak a lot. I don't know if you know him. But he's a big name in the insurance industry. And I was listening to a podcast he was on, and I didn't have this word, and the word was in my vocabulary, but I didn't have a framework for it. And the word that he used was exposure. And when I was trying to lead my business from the very beginning, I didn't have a lot of exposure in my life to other business owners and other people running businesses. So I had to learn the hard way or get more exposure. And I always realized after doing something the hard way or learning something the hard way, I didn't want to do that again. And so I quickly learned I've got to find people and put them in my life so that I can become the best of and the average of the people I spend the most time with. So I had to continuously push my network and make them better all the time. So eventually, Doug, the agency owners, the local agencies in my local area weren't taking their agencies a lot of times to the next level. And I was always trying to push mine faster or keep going. And so for me, I had to kind of reach out, and I don't know if I should put a plug in for them or not, but the Sitkins group,
Mm-hmm.
Brent Kelly, Roger Sitkins over there,
Sure.
I eventually reached out to them and said, hey, I need someone in my ear that's constantly networking with agency owners that bring in $30 million in revenue, $10 million in revenue. What are they thinking? I need access to how they think. And so I always say business coaches are cheaper than partners. I don't have any partners, but coaches are cheaper than partners. So instead of bringing on a partner, I decided to bring on coaches, and now I have a handful of them, and I pay them. Uh, but they are the ones that keep me accountable, so that I can keep being pushed myself to become a better leader. I hope that answers that question.
It does, and it makes me think about the fact that it's so important. That the success that you've experienced, it seems like self-evaluation and an ongoing self-evaluation is part of the formula.
Yeah.
And I think that it's that what I've also gained out of what you were just talking about is that I think many of us, and I don't mean just us in the insurance industry, but Americans tend to be competitive folks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds to me like you have found a way to sort of blend that competitive nature with that networking. Let me get the appropriate assistance needed for what the goals I want to achieve. That's kind of what I'm reading there.
Absolutely, absolutely. I spoke at my local technical college. This is a few years ago, but I remember going into the classroom and having everyone raise their hand. I said, "Hey, who in here after finishing Greenville Technical College wants to make $50,000 a year?" And some of them would raise their hand. And who thinks they're going to make $75,000 a year? Who in this room thinks they can make more than $100,000 a year? And of course, the higher you go, the less hands that go up.
Sure.
And then you ask some of the people who want to make 50, 75, $100,000. You ask them, how many people now do you know that make that kind of money?
Hmm.
And they rarely know anyone that makes the amount of money that they themselves want to make. So, well, how do you know how someone who makes a six-figure income, how do you know how they think? How do you know what kind of questions they ask? What kind of networks they have? If you don't hang around people that are already in the position where you want to go, how do you suppose you're going to get there?
And that is sound advice. Absolutely. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here because I think it's interesting to note that our chairman and founder, Jim Masiello, has been saying for a few years now that independent agents should be calling themselves advisors, not agents. Of course, I've noticed that component of your agency's name, as well as the use of that term on your website. What led you to use that terminology rather than agent? And is there something strategic about that term in your mind?
I think E&O carriers don't like it at all.
Good point.
I think it probably puts a little too much pressure on us, to be honest with you. I didn't really think of that when we were forming the business. At the very beginning, Doug, it was more simple than it seems now. Once something's established, you start putting framework around it and branding and ideas around it. But at the beginning, it was way more simple than that. And so it was just a matter of I wrote down like 15 to 20 names. I knew a couple things. I didn't want it to be my name. I remember when I worked at State Farm, if anything happened, somebody wasn't happy with anything you did for them, they were looking for the name on the sign, right? Where's that guy? That's who I want to talk to. And so as building a business that was going to create freedom of time, deeper relationships, and more financial security for me, my family, my team, that didn't include everything landing on my shoulders. And so I didn't want the name of the business to be me or the partners or something.
Right.
I wanted it to be a brand, and I wanted to be something that our team could feel a part of. I also wanted to sound familiar, almost sound like it's always been there. And I got the proof of that one day when the first guy I hired, he he started working for us for just a few months, and he was at dinner and someone asked him, where do you work? He said he worked at Advisors Insurance Agency. And the guy said, oh yeah, I've heard of you guys. I was like, we've been open for 8 months. You've never heard of us. Like, we don't exist in anyone's eyes. So, but it's just that sound, like Advisors. And yeah, I think I've heard of them. No, you never have, but I'm glad that you feel that way.
Sure. So that being the early, if you will, humble beginnings of the name, now that you're 9 years down the road, does that feel like it was very appropriate after all, as opposed to having that, insurance agent?
Yes,
you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, it does. The word, because now, everything that I train my team and learn about is obviously creating value. We don't want to be quoters and floaters. We want to sell off of value. We want to sell off of advice. If that's all we can do is lean on our prices and our speed, then we're going to fail. That can be replaced by technology, software, rooms full of people just hopping on the phone.
Sure.
So what's going to separate us? It's our ability to do risk management, have conversations, and solve problems. And so as an insurance advisor, a risk advisor, financial advisor, that's what we do. And so I've been able to take that name and just blend it into our entire brand. So instead of calling them account executives, it's account advisors. Instead of producers, insurance advisors, and just bring that name into everything that we do.
And I will tell you, I obviously I did a little homework as part of preparation, and I did notice that for sure. It stood out to me on your website that all your team, they're advisors. They're not, as you said, account executives or account managers or whatever it might be. Whatever their function is, advisors is built into their title. So, yeah, it's consistent. It's great, actually. So, speaking of your staff, as you were mentioning, you have, I think it's now up to 18 advisors at your agency or doing business on behalf of your agency. And I have to wonder, now that you're almost 9 years into this and we've grown to a certain size, how do you keep these folks motivated and producing? I mean, and you talked about finding the right people. How do you find the right people? And then how do you keep them from leaving?
Do you want to start a new podcast right now?
Okay. In 3 minutes or less.
Doug, 3, 4, 5 years ago, I probably couldn't have an intelligent conversation about this. But today, we've done a lot of work around that. I hate the word luck, but we did get lucky in a lot of times finding the right people. I had good networks and had built relationships to find good people up front. But the longer you're in the business, it takes proactive work to find the right people. And then once you find people, you have identified people that you might want to work for you. And typically, I read a book that talked about this, but you want to pull people into your agency, not find people that have been pushed out of their previous situation. Find people who are already employed and pull them out of positions and pull them into yours. And so that's what I try to do. I don't try to find people that are waiting on the sidelines without employment and bring them in, or hire out of desperation. Continue to recruit, build the bench, and then pull people in that you've built relationships with. And then once you find people, how do you get them interested in your agency? And I don't think we talked about this, but I have another company called Producers to Principals, which is just a consulting business that helps agency owners stop acting like producers and start acting like the principals their agencies desperately need. But in that, the thing that I talk about, the very first thing that we talk about is, what Simon Sinek talks about in his books. Why? Why should your prospects choose to engage with you? Why should your team continue to work for you? Why should prospective team members even listen to what you have to say? Why should your clients stay with you? What are all these things? What makes you different in your marketplace? Is it that you're local, you're independent, you have great prices, you're faster, and you have great service? Well, you know, that's worn out. That's what everyone says. So what actually makes you different? What do you stand for? What principles does your team run by? So those things are not prospecting and writing clients, which is a different kind of work. It's not hard work. It's not like digging ditches. It's just
Right.
putting pen to paper or fingers to keyboard and just writing out what you stand for and including your team in developing that. And once you lay that groundwork, you memorize it, repeat it, and internalize it, then it just bleeds out. When you reach out to someone on LinkedIn to try to pull them into your company because you need to hire someone and they go to look at your website, it tells them why they should work for you and why it's maybe better than their current situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then it sounds like you have ways or methodologies or an approach that really makes your team feel vested in your organization.
It's a lot of those things. They know why they work there, right? If you don't know why you work here, then maybe you shouldn't. That's okay. I'm okay to part as friends if you don't feel like this is the right fit for you. I'd rather have the right people that feel like this is the right place for them because ultimately they're going to take care of our clients better. And so we spend a lot of time talking about what our points of differentiation are in the marketplace. We spend a lot of time talking about our rally cries that we're looking to make sure when we're bringing on clients, are those clients worth our time, energy, and talent? And everything that we do, are we creating more freedom of time, deeper relationships, and more financial security? Or are we practicing in a way that is creating less freedom of time? We're creating shallow relationships with our team members and our clients because we're taking on too much volume and not enough value. Or are we creating less financial security because all of our clients are experiencing bad customer experiences and likely to leave?
Good. Yep. Consideration. Okay, so I have my eye on the time a little bit, and so I want to make sure that we touch base on one item regarding key performance indicators. Everybody throws around the acronym KPIs, and that's nice, but it stands for key performance indicators, and those can be different depending on your specific agency or your specific business or whatever it might be. But I'm wondering, how important are they for you and then the management of your agency, and what do you deem to be the key performance indicators?
Well, I would say the key performance indicator is, do you have data? Yes, everyone has data. Are you recording it in a way that is accessible and accurate? Most agencies, the answer is no. You don't have a process for what data is to be collected and how it's to be recorded so that it's attainable when you need it. And so you have KPIs, but they're not accurate. You can't make decisions off of them. So when you have agency management systems, and I hope that most people do, when your team is gathering data, are they typing it into your management systems in a way that can be used to make decisions based off of? Because everyone can love to have a KPI of retention, but you go to pull a retention report and it's 30% off.
Right.
So it doesn't matter. So, first key performance indicator for your own agency and yourself is, do I have data? Where is it going? How is it going in? What does it look like? Is it accurate? Then once you have accurate data, things that we monitor for our team is accounts per relationship. We want to know how sticky we are with our clients. Does each of our clients on average have one policy, two policies, 1.7, 3.2? What is that?
Right.
Retention, of course. We want to know how many of our clients at each renewal cycle are staying with us. And we want to know what our average revenue is per relationships.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
And I say that because I don't I I often think that folks believe that they just need to count, oh, how many customers do I have, right? Or how many relationships do I have? But it really comes down to what is that revenue for that relationship.
Yeah.
And so do you get others in the organization, your other advisors in your organization, are they in tune to those numbers as well? Or is that something you keep to yourself?
I'm an open book. Sitkins helped us with this. Each producer, advisor, Sitkins taught all of us this. We flew down to Florida and spent some time down there. Just the idea of the Me Incorporated means each advisor has their book of business and clients they're writing. Well, that's kind of like their own business, their own book of business. And they have to know what those responsibilities are, what kind of clients they're bringing on and they're responsible for. And if they don't know the numbers, then it's hard to help them change their habits. And so they know exactly what their books of business do. They know how much revenue is coming in. They know how much on the whole agency level. They know how much their commission split is for that. They know what the expenses are on the agency for that book of business. So when they come to me and say, "Hey, Miles, I'd like a raise," okay, well, let's look at the numbers. As a goal, our agency wants to create a 25% operating profit margin. Here's our cost to do business. Here's what I'm paying you. Here's what the agency's making. Okay, I've got an extra 2%. What would you like to do with it? You want to invest in some more technology? You want to help add some benefits to our team members, or do you want it?
Right. And that's what a great way to guide that conversation, right?
Yeah. I mean, my goal is 25% profit margin. So if I'm reaching my goal, then the money's to be spent somewhere. Just let's pick a bucket and put it in it. But if it's the opposite direction and say, "Hey, I'm only making 17, my goal is 25, so I actually can't give you a raise." As a matter of fact, I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Right. It goes a different way than they were anticipating. So, okay, recognizing that, are there any of those KPIs, or are there KPIs that you don't share necessarily with the staff that's only for you as the owner?
Yeah. And I'll say when it comes to data, there's some areas that I would like to know, but due to, limited ability through the technology we have, there's some things I just can't get a good hold on. Like, I'd love to know number of outstanding tasks, how long it takes for those tasks to get taken care of once they're created. And there's some technology solutions out there that can help me get that data, but it would take a lot of work to shift our whole team around. The bigger you get, the less fluid you are. But so the other things that I monitor, revenue per employee, that's big. I want to know how much revenue we have per employee. Is that too high? Is it too low? Are we moving in the right direction? What is our operating profit margin? That's really important to me. Are we making money on a profit on a operating side? Yeah. I am open to this to my team, but how's our pipeline health? But I'm constantly looking at that versus what were our sales this month. I'm more interested in how healthy are our pipelines, and are they filled with qualified target clients? And then I'm always interested in looking at number of calls that go to voicemail versus get picked up. Why are we having too many voicemails? How long does it take to pick up the phone? I don't really share those numbers with my team, but I look at them to see kind of what's going on with our customer experience. Are we having issues with, is it a trend? Is it, am I having issues with my service team picking up the phone? What's happening?
So as I think about that, I'm wondering, do you use such measurements in a way that just sort of draws attention to, well, this is worth I need to look at this. And by that, I mean, for example, the number of calls that go to voicemail. Let's say you have an excellent producer, is producing quite well, is hitting all the marks off the charts, but a lot of their calls go into voicemail. And my thought process would be that it doesn't necessarily immediately jump to, oh, they're never picking up the phone. It could be they're engaged with a lot of clients and they're doing something related to a sale, and that's why it's going into voicemail. So I draw this illustration to ask the question, do you how shall I say, do you go in with a preset of thoughts, if you will, right? In terms of going to voicemail is a bad thing, as opposed to there are a lot of calls going into voicemail. It's just a flag that I should take a look at why.
And I think that the answer also depends on where the voicemails are happening. So if it's happening on the immediate ring into our office, someone calls into our office, and just from the general number, how many of those are going to voicemail? How often are we able to pick those up? Like if someone just calls our office and it goes to voicemail, most of the time people just, especially if it's a prospect, they're just going to hang up, not leave a voicemail, call the next agency on the list of Google.
Yep.
So I don't want those going to voicemail. Now, if voicemails are going to agents, if things are going to agents' voicemails, yeah, you're right. I'm not so concerned about that. If it was a lot of voicemails, I'd want to know what's happening in their sales process. Is it service stuff? Why are clients going directly to the agent's voicemails for service when they should be focused on results and not activities? Are they not doing a good job introducing clients to their account advisor teams or our processing teams? Why is that stuff coming back on them? Does that make sense?
It does. That's good. That's good stuff, because I think you're right on, right? I mean, again, you're saying I need to identify why this is happening, and are we not utilizing another tool we have in place or another individual we have in place, and that's what's causing it. So it is like a flag to you, as opposed to a predetermined negative or positive.
And a lot of times just setting expectation, so if the producer's doing a good job setting the right expectation with the customer, he says, hey, listen, just leave me a voicemail. That's the best way. If you call, leave me a voicemail. It comes to my email. I will reply. And the agent is getting those voicemails. They are replying, and the customer has a good experience, and it's what they expected. Then that's perfect way of doing business.
Sure. That makes sense. So I'm going to skip over a few things here because we're actually running out of time, as we knew we would. I would like to drop to a question that is this simple. What haven't we touched on to this point that you deem critical to the success of your agency?
Critical to the success of my agency. I think it comes down to just learning to lead the agency. That's really the difference. If I look at other agencies that get stuck and plateau, it is because they have gotten comfortable and are making a great income. Let's be honest, the average agent makes a fantastic income. So what is encouraging them to be better than average? So just get comfortable. And I'm only 38. And my wife asked me the other day, like, I thought you said you were going to start taking some more time to spend with family and other things. And I said, I know I said that, but I've changed my mind. Like, I don't actually work that much. I work 40 hours a week, if that. But I'm probably not going to work less. I was like, just let's be honest, like my playground is the insurance business. It's my outlet. So if insurance business can't be my outlet, then what is? Because I'll go crazy. This is where I flex, right? This is where I get creative. This is where I grow. If I'm not growing, if I'm not moving, if we're not changing, if I'm just staying comfortable, I'm getting bored, and it's time to hang it up and quit and sell and go do something else. I just can't sit around. And so I think that's what motivates me. If I'm in my office right now upstairs, if I was to walk downstairs right now, I would just start getting nervous. My wife will tell you, my hands will start shaking. Like I'll get butterflies in my stomach. She's like, what's wrong with you? It's like, I've got to go back to work. You don't understand. It's not time to get off yet. Like it's not lunchtime and it's not off time. I've got to go back.
You know what? I would sum that up a little bit differently and say you have a passion for what you do.
Yes.
That's awesome. So I do have to ask you one more thing, and it's really about anybody who's listening, that they either own their agency or they are a prospective owner, and they hear about, or more locally, more regionally, they probably see your operation and they wonder how they can achieve that level of success. Do you have some advice that you would offer to those folks?
Yeah. And my advice is to stop acting like a producer and start acting like a principal of your insurance agency. Stop competing with your sales team and lead them. Stop wishing for things to get done and implement one thing. Stop taking on too much at one time and do one thing well. You don't have to accomplish 5 great things in 2021, including changing management systems, creating brand, hiring people, creating process and procedures. Just pick one and do it really, really well. Overcome your static friction and get some momentum. And the best way to do that is get an accountability partner. Get someone on your side that will give you a kick in the rear end to get moving. Static friction is what it takes to get, that's what's keeping you where you are. You need something to get you over that static friction. And once you're moving, then that kinetic friction is what continues to try to slow you down. So you're always somewhere in between that static friction and that kinetic friction. And so to keep you moving and flowing, a lot of times everyone just needs an accountability partner to keep you going. So get someone that can kick you in the rear end, pick something that's important and do it well. Think strategically and don't get down in the dirt. Do it, delegate, or delete it.
Very good. Very good. So, I had another way I was going to sum that up, but that's just perfect. So I'm going to leave it alone. This has been great. And I'd like to thank you for sharing with our listeners today, Miles. It's been terrific having you on our podcast. I hope that maybe you would consider coming on for another show, another episode, because obviously there is so much more that we could get into. And I think that would be awesome.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd like to remind our guests our listeners that our guest today has been Miles Merwin, who's president and owner of Advisors Insurance Agency in Greenville, South Carolina. And I want to say thanks to our listeners for tuning into this episode of Insurance Agents Talk Shop. I'm Doug Coombs, Chief Marketing Officer at SIAA, and I hope you'll join us next time. To learn more about SIAA, the largest alliance of independent insurance agencies in the United States, please visit SIAA.com.